Yes, and it's very good to be here with you this evening at Dharma Night. And if you're tuning in after that as well, hello from me. So I was also very pleased to be asked to give this talk. A talk on this book, Wisdom Beyond Words. You can see that. And I do remember when reading this book for the first time, and I had a real range of different feelings and responses to the material in this book. It's not the kind of book I don't think, you take on the beach and get through in one sitting. You do have to do it in bite-sized chunks, as it were, because there's a lot to absorb. But I remember having a combination of feeling exhilarated, excited by it, also baffled too by it. So it's a Wisdom Beyond Words, and the subtitle of the book is Sense and Nonsense in the Buddhist Prajnaparamita tradition. And I really like that sense and nonsense because I remember my mum used to say, if we reported something to her, me and my sisters, something we heard, she'd just look at us and say, pick sense out of nonsense. And I actually didn't know what she meant. I think, what does she mean? What's she trying to tell me? Pick sense out of nonsense. But it would make me think about what I just said to her. I think about, what have I just said that she's had that response? And it would make me interrogate the situation a bit more closely, actually. So when I saw that, it's the other time I've seen sense and nonsense in the Buddhist Prajnaparamita tradition. I had a smile on my face because it reminded me of my mum's phrase. And also, the other thing about this book is, it came from a series of seminars, not even lectures, seminars that Bhante Sangharakshita, the founder of Triratna, that he gave. And the word seminars can sound like it's like lectures, but actually it was much more like he was gathered with a few of his students, a few of his disciples, and it came out of a series of conversations that are based on some key ancient texts such as the Heart Sutra, the Diamond Sutra, and the other talks in this series have explored some of that. So do go back and listen to some of those if you haven't done. But yes, very much that he basically exploring these texts. And it's very this wisdom beyond words, that was also very attractive to me as well. This kind of series of really oral sort of it's very much the oral tradition when you sit around with a group of people and he's speaking and they are listening and questioning, and out of that all this material comes into being. And so it has a sort of dynamic feel to it, actually, for me when I was reading this book. I remember feeling like it feels like it's very alive because it's really come from a variety of people's different experiences and reflections on this ancient text. And what they're trying to do, they're using words, of course, using words to point beyond words. And when we get to the point where words are not enough, to articulate our experience, and that happens to us, doesn't it? When sometimes words are just not enough to articulate our experience, then we have to move to images and we have to move to sounds and symbols. So as Akasha Mitra said, we have this wonderful tanka here of the Prajnaparamita, the mother of all the Buddhas, and it's very beautiful. And she's golden. And certainly when I've brought her to mind, the sense I get of her is, well, you can see she's perfectly poised, firstly, perfectly balanced. She has the ancient text in her hands. And really the sense I get when I bring her to mind is of a loving, complete detachment. So the sort of love of the sort of ideal mother, as it were, but also this mature detachment that comes from understanding how things are, understanding how things come into being, and then a deep letting go on the basis of that. So a very, different figures have different qualities to them, and certainly for me, Prajnaparamita has this sense when I bring her to mind of, profound letting go, the deepest letting go. So very beautiful to have her with us, with me, this evening. So yes, a series of conversations that come out of a reflection of these ancient texts. And what I was reading, actually, when I was sort of thinking about this talk, I was reading about that time when Sangharakshita was having these conversations. And apparently, when there was a series of all these conversations over a period of time, and the result of it was that people really tapped into a deeper level of inspiration and a deeper level of relaxation. And at the time, they'd been working very, very hard, actually building the movement, retreat centres and courses and all kinds of things, and working really, really hard. And Sangharakshita chose to give this series of seminars at that time. And apparently the effect is that they basically, they didn't stop working, but they certainly relaxed their efforts. And then they carried on with their commitments, but they relaxed the way they were working. It's almost like they were working, sort of nose to the grindstone, as it were, hard. And somehow, having these reflections, these conversations, they began to work from a much broader perspective, a much more relaxed perspective. And apparently after that, there was a real greater degree of creativity that went into the movement in terms of retreats and events that were happening. So I found that very interesting, that you can study these ancient profound texts, and part of the result of it is a deeper relaxation. I don't know if we're going to get there tonight, but I wanted to introduce that because that was a sort of that was an interesting bit of information. So yes. So when I was asked to do this talk on, the book is Wisdom Beyond Words. I was very attracted to the book. I remember my excitement about the book, and I kind of thought, I hope I get a really exciting topic, because there's lots of different chapters and lots of different things you can talk about. I thought, I hope I get a really exciting topic. And something not like patience. And of course, the universe has a way of reflecting us back very aptly. So the topic I was given was the perfection of patience. And I thought, oh no. And it was interesting because I thought, where's that coming from? And I remember a time when I thought to myself, I'm really not a very patient person. I'm actually quite impatient. That's how I would see myself. And so I think it came from there. And I thought, actually, is that true? So I had to ask myself, is it true that I don't think I'm a very patient person? And I've sort of definitely changed from when I thought that. So it was good actually to kind of review and go, I've actually changed, and I need to acknowledge that there's been changes around that. The other thing that came to me, I thought, why did I think I was an impatient person? Why did I not have an immediate, yes, I'm going to talk about patience, how fantastic. And I think that was because sort of certainly growing up, it was often said, be patient, be patient, sit down and be patient, was often said when I was little. I didn't want to be, because to me, what that said was that it was about being quiet and putting up with things, putting up with things that I didn't necessarily want to put up with, or accepting things that I didn't want to accept. Certainly the environment I grew up in was was lots of injustices, lots of inequality there that I experienced, I could see other people experiencing as well. And things like, that's just the way things are. I was thinking, no, it doesn't have to be like that, surely. So I had I actually want to change things. I don't want to accept some of the way that things are. So there was that. And I also had a very strong, desire to know and understand. I knew there were things I didn't understand about myself. I knew there were things I didn't understand about the world. So I didn't want to accept that either. I wanted to discover. I wanted to learn. I wanted to grow. So again, sometimes when the word be patient was said to me, I just felt like it was holding me back from this world of discovery, actually. And it was also holding me back from wanting to inquire about why things were the way they were, and then how to change them. So yes, I didn't sort of have an immediately positive response to patience. And of course we've got the English sort of saying that patience is a virtue, and that's also interesting as well. Patience is a virtue. It wasn't one of my favourite sayings. And I think when we say that, of course it is a virtue, it's a positive thing to have patience, but it did feel like being good and conforming, and certain amount of passivity as well. So yes, I was very pleased when I discovered the Buddhist approach to patience, because it really was quite different to that, actually. So I'm going to read out, actually, there's a little chapter on patience in this book. So I'm going to read out the beginning of it, and it's not easy. It's a little quite short paragraph, but certainly it's not comfortable reading. So I'm going to read it and see what you think. And I'll also read the immediate thing that Bhante Sangharakshita says about this. And it comes from the Perfection of Wisdom. And just if you're new to this series, it's a discourse that the Buddha's giving to one of his senior disciples called Subhuti. And it goes like this. Moreover, Subhuti, the Tathagata's perfection of patience is really no perfection. And why? Because, Subhuti, when the king of Kalinga cut my flesh from every limb, at that time I had no perception of a self, of a being, of a soul or a person. And why? If, Subhuti, at that time I had a perception of self, I would also have had a perception of ill will at that time. And so if the perception was of a being, of a soul or of a person. With my super knowledge, I recall that in the past I have for 500 births led the life of a sage devoted to patience. Then also have I had no perception of a self, a being, a soul, or a person. So that's the text. And Bhante says, the Buddha is saying that there are two kinds of patience. One, the mundane virtue, is where you just grit your teeth stoically and turn the other cheek, what I didn't want to do when I was young, I think. Even though you'd like to give the other person a sock on the jaw. The other, the transcendental kind, is where you are not in any sense conscious of anything being done to you by anybody. You are not fostering a notion of a self or a non-self, nor the other person as being bound to either of these categories. With the one you are doing, the first one, you are doing your best not to act upon your anger. With the other, there is simply no possibility of anger. You see somebody doing something, but there is no trace in your mind of the idea that he, she, or they are doing this to me. So yes, a very, very different concept, idea of patience to the one that I grew up with, for sure. And from that reading, we're really now in the sort of stratosphere of enlightenment. We're in the stratosphere of the enlightened mind, where, and even Bhante Sangharakshita says, it's very lofty indeed. Okay, so we're really somewhere else at this point in time. And I think it's uncomfortable. First time I remember reading that, it's very uncomfortable, this idea of what happens to the Buddha in his previous lives. He's talking about his previous life, and this idea, this violent, murderous act happening, and his response to that as being, well, no ill will, no anger. And I think what that's doing, and it's almost like a bit of a device, a literary device. I mean, you can see it as literally true if you want, or poetically true, but certainly it's a device to jolt us into really our fears and the things that threaten us. So this is an extreme example of something terrible that could happen to somebody, and of course we think that would be terrible, and of course I would be angry and fearful and all these things. And they're saying that even with one of the most extreme things you can think of, the enlightened mind, the enlightened being, still will not have any ill will or anger. So that's what it's doing. And it made me think about, we do have all these fears, don't we? We have fears of, losing a loved one. We have fears of insecurity around work, perhaps, or money, or our own health. All these fears come to mind. Some things come into being and some things don't, but they're still there with us, these fears. And we assume that of course our response is going to be to be angry or upset or hurt or damaged in some way if these things happen. And what this is doing is saying, doesn't necessarily have to be that. That's not the only response. There is another way of seeing this, which actually is very liberating. And where our ordinary mind probably struggle with that, in a sense, struggle with that idea that you could have these terrible things happening and not have a negative response. So I'm inviting you to, as I've done, to just imagine that possibility, to imagine the possibility that really challenging, difficult things can happen, and our response doesn't have to be negative. It can be positive. It can be beautiful even. It can be very profound, our response, and creative, our response. So yes, I think it's important to make the distinction that we're talking this kind of perfection of patience. It is the ultimate patience, so which is what the Buddhas have, and that's making that distinction between that and our practice, where we are, the sort of training ground. So the paramitas, these perfection of qualities, they are both the fruit. So if you've practiced for lifetimes, as we've just heard in that quote, the fruit is these lofty experiences, lofty states. But the path, there's a training ground for that. There's many years, many lifetimes where we train, and we start from wherever we are. So when I was thinking about that today, I thought, well, actually, I sort of can have one response to that, which is, gosh, this is going to take a long time, isn't it? It's long, this journey then. How long is it going to take me? I can definitely have that response. But actually, and I used to have that response much more, but actually over time, I've begun to see that as actually, that's almost reassuring in a sense too. Because if you try to work with anger or fear, or any of those sort of challenging emotions, you'll know that it's not easy. You'll know that you make some progress, but then you find yourself back again. You'll know that you have to keep at it, and even then it still arises. And that's because our sort of core negative emotions run very deep. They run super deep, if you like. And so just us doing a few meditations and some ethics and trying to change some of our conditions of our life isn't going to uproot this sort of the core sort of negative emotions of the human mind and heart, because what we're actually talking about is a complete transformation of the human heart and mind, and we're talking about complete liberation. So, of course, a few weeks, months, even years of practice is not going to eradicate that. So that actually is reassuring to me, in a sense. And also over time, what I've seen is that actually, if I don't worry about the perfection, if I don't worry about the end goal, if I just pay attention, if I have the end goal, be aware of it, But actually, if I just pay attention to now, I begin to appreciate the learning in the experience. So if I have a very positive experience, then I enjoy that. And if I'm with the challenges, then actually I know that there's learning that is going on. Because the truth, one of the truths that underpin this is actions have consequences, the law of karma. Positive actions have positive consequences, negative actions have negative consequences. So if I am actually practicing, if I am paying attention, even in the midst of challenges, then I know at some point it will bear fruit and I will experience this. And we say this a lot when we do retreats. So we've been having lots of online retreats, and we've had in person. We're going to start in person retreats as soon as we are able to again. But usually people are very excited at the beginning of retreats, not always, but often people are like, have in their minds all the things that they want to change and transform, and there's lots of energy, and that's great. And then usually about day 3, day 4, he's sort of smiling in the back because they sort of know it very well. Day 3, day 4, the challenges, the resistances, the old patterns that start arising again. And we just say, stay with it, because it will change. It will change. So yeah, it takes us a while to transform. We just have to keep staying with it. And I'll come back to that in a bit, because I think that's a really key point. But what the Buddha does, in terms of telling us about his 500 lifetimes of practice, that is to kind of say, look, this takes time. That's the main message here. This takes time. This doesn't happen overnight, this lofty way of being. This where ultimately you don't see. Why he's able to do that is because he's uprooted the ignorance, the illusion of self. He recognises there's no essential separation between him and other. And that's why he's able to respond in that way. So he gives us that perspective, and there are in his actual life there were lots of stories of where the Buddha was challenged. So you've got his past lives that he talks about, which often are quite fantastical, the kind of things that you hear. But then you've got his actual life, and in his actual life you have stories such as his cousin Devadatta trying to kill him. So Buddha didn't actually have. Not everybody liked the Buddha, let's say. Not everybody liked the Buddha. He had his enemies. He had people that wanted to stop him, and his cousin was just full of envy and jealousy, and as a result would constantly try and put all different obstacles in his way. And one day the cousin lets loose a wild elephant in the path of the Buddha. And I've never been that up close to an elephant, but I imagine they're huge. And they're strong, and if it's wild, then it's untamed. And I imagine this elephant hurling down the hill towards the Buddha, and the dust, flying up, and the trunk sort of, going from side to side, and its head as well. And the Buddha just ferociously, sort of madly, as it were, charging. And apparently the Buddha stands there and basically just watches this elephant coming towards him. And there's no fear, there's no ill will, there's no threat. And basically, you all right there? Yeah, okay. No threat, no fear, no ill will. And the Buddha, what actually happens is as the elephant moves towards the Buddha, it begins to slow down. It senses that the elephant's a sentient being. It feels and it senses the Buddha's depth of calm. It senses the Buddha's depth of confidence. It probably even perhaps senses the Buddha's love. And there's really wonderful images of this where you've got the Buddha who's just touching the elephant's forehead. His sort of head is bowed and the Buddha's touching his forehead, and it's just very moving. So the Buddha was just able to see what was happening, and no negativity, in fact pure positive qualities and a deep connection to the elephant. And then you've got another incident, which I really like this one, and I found this one very practically helpful in terms of patience. And that's where a Brahmin comes up to the Buddha. And the Brahmin is like the higher echelons, basically the top strata of Indian society. Sort of the highest class in English terms, if you like. And obviously the caste system, very rigid. The Brahmins would be the ruling elite. And the Buddha wasn't from that caste. He was, I think, from the caste just below that, or one or two below that. So this Brahmin comes up to the Buddha and starts cursing him, starts calling all these names. And that's because, for all kinds of reasons, but the Buddha, I said, wasn't popular for everybody. He had really changed and transformed the Indian society by that time. He'd managed to get a whole a community of people who were dedicated to spiritual enlightenment, not dedicated to making lots of money or other ordinary pursuits. They were dedicated to pursuing enlightenment. And he had ordinary people following him, as well as, the kings and queens. So he had a real effect on society. He had women, for the first time, leaving home and following the homeless life, which was completely revolutionary in those days. He didn't recognise social hierarchies, so his community was mixed of all stratas of society, and no recognition of caste. So lots of people had a problem with the Buddha because he was really disrupting in many aspects the social order of the day. So this Brahmin comes up to him and starts cursing him and abusing him, and the Buddha just says to him, he listens firstly, and then says to him at the end, "Have you finished?" And the Brahmin says, I guess so. He's run out of things to say, basically, because the Buddha was patiently listening. He's run out of things to say, yes, I think so. And then he says to him, let me ask you a question. If somebody gives you a present and you don't want it, it's not desired, and you give, who does the gift, the present, actually belong to? And he says, well, it's not mine. If I don't want it, I give it back. It's not mine. So then the Buddha said, exactly. So your words that you've given to me, I don't accept them. I'm giving them back to you. And the Brahmin then has to accept that the Buddha has really just very calmly, very patiently, but very wisely just handed back the Brahmin's words. And I found this very practically helpful for when I got criticisms after that. And I remember the first time I tried it on, as it were, I'd gotten some criticisms, and I had my responses to them, my upset around them, but then I remembered this story and I thought, I don't actually have to accept it. I can just give it back. And what I did though, I did think, okay, if it's a gift, they've given you something, which does it belong to you? And I thought, well, the way they've said it doesn't belong to me, that's them. The tone of voice, that's them. Most of what they've said doesn't belong to me because I didn't relate to it, I didn't think it was true. But actually, that first time I remember there was one or two things that for me, I thought it rang true. I thought there's a bit of truth in that. So I thought actually those bits of the gift I can accept, and I will accept them. Not in the tone or the manner, but I will actually receive them as a gift because there's something for me to think about. But the rest of it, the 80% and the way it was said, I handed back, and that felt very freeing. So that's something that you can do, and that's something I still do. Just think, actually, let me evaluate that. And that's actually what happened, is that I stood back from the whole experience. Rather than get caught up in all my emotional responses, I stood back from it and thought, okay, let's look at this objectively. What is there that I need to keep, and what can I give back? So There are 6 parameters. There's 6 of these sort of great qualities to develop, to perfect, to training. And we've heard other talks on dana, generosity, and there's ethics. And the parameters sit in the middle of, it's a third one basically, it's a third training ground, it's a first perfected quality. And that's probably not accidental, because dana, generosity, well, it's a very, very natural thing to have. It's a very human quality. We do it all the time. Most people will give in some way at some time. We give our time, we give our energy, we give our attention, we give our money, our gifts. So it's a very natural quality. Ethics, we train in ethics, or we're taught ethics from very young. You know, this, if you do this, this will happen. We're taught that often. So again, that comes more naturally, if you like, to us. At least the understanding that if somebody does something harmful, somebody does something negative, it has a painful effect. And if we do something negative, it has a painful effect. We know that. And if somebody does something positive to us, we know that we're happy. So in a very simple way, we can understand ethics. But patience is definitely something that we need to keep progressing. And while it might come naturally to some people, certainly for me, it was definitely a quality I had to much more consciously cultivate. And we certainly need it to keep venturing through the other parameters, to keep venturing on the path, to keep practicing spiritually, because spiritual practice is not easy. So we need a perspective that actually helps us stay with the process that we're in. So there are 3 aspects of patience that I'm going to talk about now. And one is forbearance. In a way, I've already spoken about that through the story of the Buddha's life. Forbearance, another interesting word. And my mum, going back to my mum, she would say to me, if I was getting agitated about something or I wanted something to happen, she would say to me, bear patience, bear patience. And it's almost a combination, I realise now, of forbearance and patience. Bear patience, she would say. And actually sometimes when she said that, I would relax a little bit. I would relax a bit. And I remember when I, had my own son, and I'd be saying something to her about being a mum, and she'd say, "Bear patience," and it had a real wisdom to it. Actually, I look back now, it had a real wisdom to it. She understood that what was happening was sort of in the course of things, and it would change. So it was like she was encouraging me to sort of find the strength to actually stay with the experience and be present to it and be as positive as I could with it. And, she was somebody that had a lot of challenges in her life. And, I would see her sort of deal with these challenges and suffer, definitely, sometimes, and, be in pain. But somehow I also saw that she seemed to grow from these challenges. I saw her become stronger as well after some of these experiences, and happier too in herself. So that was always fascinating to me, that I would see her sort of be challenged and then a bit later on actually just seem a bigger person to me. So that was she was a very good role model in that sense. So forbearance, the ability to be with, challenging experiences. And I think we've all had this experience with COVID-19, of course. We've had to, probably at the beginning we thought it would last a few weeks, a few months max, and more than a year later we're still being impacted by it in different ways. In the UK it's getting easier, we're opening up, but in other parts of the world it's a natural disaster, if you like, that's still unfolding. And we had to, because we didn't know what was happening, we had to bear with it. So forbearance, and Bhante Sangharakshita says that we need to have this quality of forbearance with nature. You might decide you're going to meet your friends in the park and you've got the whole day planned out, and then you open the curtains in the morning and it's pelting down with rain. And what's our response? What's our response to that? So there's nature, there's natural disasters, and things like, well, COVID has turned into a disaster in many areas. That's a biological sort of virus, if you like. That's nature, isn't it, in a different kind of way to the weather. So that has an effect. We can't control many of these things. So how do we respond to that? And of course, with our having patience with our own bodies as well. Our bodies get sick. We can't always rely on our bodies to do what we want our bodies to do. So, and of course, the ultimate of that is death itself, and old age, sickness, death. Those are the three things that the Buddha realised were crucial situations for us. And of course, other people. And it was apparently Jean-Paul Sartre, according to Bhante, who said that hell is other people, which is a very strong statement. But Bhante says heaven is other people as well. So it's good to remind ourselves of that. But other people don't do what we want us to do. No matter how close they are to us, they don't act like we want them to act. And actually we don't act like we want us to act often as well. So other people and ourselves having patience, forbearance towards ourselves as well. And I'm going to read a short poem by Bhante because he really sort of encapsulates this, and it's one of my favourites, one of his. Well, I'll read a little excerpt, and he says, vainly we try to track bird flight through the sky, trace dumb fish through deep water, try to anticipate the earned smile, the soft reward, even try to grasp our own lives. But life slips through our fingers like snow. Life cannot belong to us. We belong to it. We belong to life. Life is king. So things change, things are impermanent. So when pleasant things happen, we enjoy that. When unpleasant things happen that we can't control, we practice forbearance. And this forbearance is not the gritting of your teeth type. It's really being aware that we can respond with metta. We can respond with metta to our experience, and we can also respond with trying to understand all the conditions that have brought this experience into being. So we practice forbearance with nature, with ourselves, our bodies, our physical beings, people, and our interactions with other people. So I think so. That's forbearance, and the other aspect I wanted to bring out of patience is constancy or steadfastness. So I really like this aspect of patience, and it would have been good growing up if somebody had said, "Oh, this is also patience, being constant and steadfast." And then this is just about keep applying effort, keep going, regardless of what's happening. You don't give up. Because if your intention, if your motivation, if you're actually putting positive effort there, that means getting onto your cushion, meditating, keeping on, in communication, when communication might be difficult, whatever it is, if you know that you're putting positive effort in, and you're trying to transform a challenging situation, then it will bear fruit. And this is a law of karma coming into being. So yes, and I think, we might need to adjust our effort, we might need to change what we do, we might need to get support, we might need to get, encouragement, might need to step back from a situation. These are all the things that we might need to do, but we still have it in mind. We still have it in mind to keep going because we know that we want to transform. We also know that there's something to transform. We want to cultivate a loving awareness more and more, and wisdom. So we keep going. And I like this because there's energy, you know, there's something you can do. That is not the kind of just sit there and accept thing aspect. It is like, keep applying effort. Just be aware you might need to change that effort, or understand a different way of doing things, but you keep applying effort because it's worth it. And this is what I say when I work with people who are activists as well, who are working in the social justice sphere. Sometimes it's very easy to get despondent, for example, because you think, gosh, there's so many problems in the world. I think, but is it worthwhile what you're doing? Then if it's worthwhile, keep doing it. You might need a rest from time to time. You might need to re-inspire yourself, but it's worth doing. Just, you might have to adjust the way you do it. So it's definitely positive actions will have positive consequences. And so that's another aspect of patience, is constancy, steadfastness, not giving up. It's if the goal is worth it, and certainly spiritual evolution, development, enlightenment is worth it, metta, love is worth it, wisdom is worth it, keep going. And then the last aspect I want to bring out is the aspect of, which is much more an aspect that I don't think we talk about at all, hardly, something that Bhante brought out in these seminars that he was giving, which is the quality of patience as being the experience of being totally open. So that was an interesting one for me. Patience as being totally open. You're not fixing ideas. You've let go of expectations. You might be, you might have ideas of what you want to happen. Of course, we all do that. But actually not holding on to any of it rigidly, tightly. And that comes from a real depth of understanding of things arise in dependence upon conditions, and we don't control all these conditions. So being open to whatever arises, knowing that anything could arise in any moment. So the quality of patience as being prepared for anything and being totally open. And he gives the example of say you decide to invite a couple of friends round for dinner, and you've got it all planned. You're all prepared in that sense, in that mundane, ordinary sense, you're prepared. And then you get the phone call and they say, actually, there's 5 of us coming round, or even there's 10 of us coming round. What's our response to that? What's your response to that? Is it like anxiety, fear? Is it annoyance? Is it just resignation? Or I'm giving up now then? Or, it could be any of those things. But if you have patience in this sense, then you know that there's a whole series of conditions that have helped bring that into being, that you're not even aware fully of what that is at that point. But you know there's a series of conditions that happened, and you know that you can respond to that. You're prepared for anything. So then that opens up the possibility that your response could be creative. It could be, right, open up the cupboards, what have I got, what can I rustle up? It could be, hey, I'm not doing this, let's all go out for dinner. It might be, okay, all come round and you're going to help prepare this and wash up afterwards. So there could be a whole manner of different responses to this situation if we recognise that things arise in dependence on conditions and cease when those conditions cease, and that we're not in control of all of it, but we can be in control or aware of our response. And then have a creative response. So this aspect of patience is creative, is spontaneous, is open, it's flexible, it's prepared for anything, and is able to respond. And personally, when I reminded myself of that, I thought, yes, this is wisdom. And it is the kind of wisdom that is exhilarating, that is exciting, that actually makes you want to make the effort for however long it takes, because there's joy in that and there's energy in that. So patience is not this quiet, it might feel calm, it comes from this depth of profound letting go, so it might have this deep calming effect, but it also has this energy in it too, because it's constant, it's steadfast, it keeps going, and it's creative and spontaneous. So that's a perfection of patience. Thank you for being patient with me and this talk. I've enjoyed talking with you, and I think I'm going to hand back to Akasha Mitra.
Thanks, Suryagupta. So you don't know this.
I don't know. I know something was happening.
Yeah. So something was happening. So thanks all of you for being very patient with us. It's been an opportunity for you to practice patience. Yeah, what happened was we've for about 10 or 15 minutes or so we could hear you, but we couldn't see you.
Oh.
But people have very generously said, it's great whether we can see you or not. Really wise teaching. So thanks for bearing with us, everyone. Really appreciate that.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that too.
And thank you for such a wonderful talk, Suryagupta. I thought you've approached that from lots of very, very interesting different angles there, and it was great the way you started off kind of talking about the personal, and I was imagining like a young Suryagupta just not wanting to be patient at all, and then taking us up to the sort of the wisdom aspect and the heights, and then coming back to how do we work with this every day as well. So thank you very much for that. So we're going to take a break in a couple of minutes, and I just want to say something before we take a break. It's interesting just now hearing Suryagupta speaking and having this slight technical hitch. It made me really think, actually, what you were saying about part of patience being a responsiveness. And it really made me think back to all the way through since the start of the pandemic, how responsive the LBC has been. I've been very proud to be associated with the LBC, actually, in terms of how responsive we have been to a situation that's just been changing week by week, really, hasn't it? As Suryagupta was saying, we didn't know at the start of this how long it would be, whether it would be weeks or whether it would be, most people thought it would be months, and here we are, 15 months later, and still most of our classes are online. And it takes a tremendous quality of patience and resilience and courage, I think, to be that responsive. And a lot of people work here to do that, and everybody that works here just, the people that are paid are just paid a very, very basic package, that covers their rent and bills and so on. So nobody gets a big salary that works here. And the majority of people that contribute to the LBC, like myself, like the tech team, we do that just because we want to. We don't get paid financially. We get paid in other ways. We get paid in fulfillment and we get paid in love, but we don't get paid money-wise, and we don't want to. But it does take resources to run something like this. I'm looking at the tech here, and we're surrounded by lights and people and equipment, and to run this program and to communicate it to everyone, it takes resources. So if you can contribute to what we're doing, we'd really appreciate it. So you could give some money for the class this evening, or if you haven't already done so and you want to set up a monthly direct debit, that would be extremely helpful for us. And just what you're doing really in giving to the LBC is contributing to that project of generosity, just trying to communicate the Dharma. We're talking about Sangharakshita's teachings here. They've been handed down to us, and what we're trying to do is just communicate that to as many people as possible, because we think that's, we know that that's what the world needs. In these difficult times, the Dharma can really, really help people. I've been very moved over the last few weeks, particularly just hearing a couple of stories where people have said to me, people I know that have come to the LBC through our online activities, and they've just said to me that it's been a real anchor for them, and it's really helped them to get through this difficult time. And what they then want to do is come forwards with us as we navigate this way, of doing hybrid classes and seeing what we're doing as we start to hopefully come out of the pandemic, at least in the UK. And as Suryagupta said, the situation around the world is still much more challenging. So do contribute to that vision if you can by donating financially, and that would be very, very welcome. And if you can't do that, that's absolutely fine as well. We give everything here freely. So you're welcome to contribute or not to contribute, but if you can, it's very, very helpful.